If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I post a new Tom Brady video every day.
And there's this one scene that I think is so powerful. It is when Tom and the players are out on the practice field for the first time. And it's just the trainers who can be out on the field. The coaching staff is up on the second floor. There's floor to ceiling windows. And they are all basically like have their noses pressed to the window, right? It's like they're at the zoo trying to find, you know, the most incredible animal, right? In the cage or whatever. And then Tom Brady walks out and they're just like, oh my God, he's really here. Oh my God, he's really here. And even in that first practice, you could see linemen, if they missed a block, oh, sorry, Tom, not going to happen again. Sorry, Tom. Wide receiver drops the ball. Tom, not going to happen again. Not going to happen again. So what I'm trying to say is nobody wanted to disappoint Tom because of his track record, his background, and the immense respect that everyone had for him. And imagine how hard it is for Tom to come into a situation to be sort of the leader of the team. And he organized those off-season, those workouts at that high school with Rob Gronkowski coming. And you know, he was very demanding. And he didn't really have a personal relationship with many of the guys, but suddenly you had DBs showing up because they wanted to be there. You had offensive linemen showing up. I mean, traveling across the country to be there. And it's all because of the respect for Tom. And truly, one person changed the entire culture, the entire focus of the organization.
You know, it's interesting, Lars, that during the pandemic, some teams, even this year, the Colts struggled with it. Tampa never did. And it's interesting. There must have been messaging in your book, I think, with the COVID the first year. So that respect Tom brings into the table, I think, had great influence. Nobody's going to disrupt a game or a practice for Tom. But if you go back and remember, a lot of teams, there were many disruptions. And if I recall, the Buccaneers didn't have any COVID disruptions in a region, by the way, which was pushing back on some mandates and some vaccines. Take me to that process, because I think sometimes we're removed from that now. But boy, that year, we had games moved and canceled, Lars.
Absolutely.
Tom Brady, you're right. He's built up enough equity to get to the point now where he gets to do these sorts of things. And Bruce Arians said this, we're not zooming in and replaying and having first take debates about when he's patting him on the back also. There are many different ways to lead.
Well, think about, I can't help but think about so many things in this. It's almost like Nick Saban going to the Miami Dolphins and the team doctor not passing Drew Brees on the physical. What would have happened if Brees gets passed and he becomes the Dolphins quarterback? Do the Patriots go on this incredible second Super Bowl run, or does Nick Saban and the Miami Dolphins derail the second wave of greatness in the Patriots? Does Nick Saban ever go to the University of Alabama? Yeah. Does he just stay there? So let's extrapolate Tom Brady in San Diego. And again, everybody would say, geez, well, maybe Mike Riley would have been a good head coach instead of getting whacked, so early. There's one other thing. You know what would have happened if, again, assuming that Brady could have been some semblance of Brady in San Diego? I'll tell you exactly what would have happened. They would have built a new stadium in San Diego. They would not be the Los Angeles Chargers today. It's the same thing with Peyton Manning and Indianapolis. Yeah. This was not a football crazed state until Peyton Manning made it so.
Yeah, when you look at Tom Brady, right, you talked about the equity, Max. Who has more equity in this league? when it comes to guys like Tom Brady. And so if he's on the sideline and he's upset with the offensive line, there's a reason. If he's upset with the wide receivers, there's a reason. And also what you understand is those are young players, right? Tristan Wirfs is going to look at Tom Brady and say, you know what? I have to be better. Ryan Jensen, who seems to get an unsportsmanlike penalty every week, knows that he has to be better. And when you're playing a tightly contested game and you are moving backwards and you hear the beep, 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 because you're going backwards because of penalties, then you know that Tom Brady's going to be upset. But let's not act like this is the first time we've seen him behave this way. I believe this has been an argument for much of Tom Brady's career when guys want to say positive things about people like Cam Newton and his attitude on the sideline, or other quarterbacks who behave in certain ways and we critique them differently than we have with Tom Brady. When it was Bill O'Brien and Tom Brady and those guys had to be separated, then nothing was said. When we see Tom Brady last year against the Houston Texans berating one of his wide receivers because the route isn't where it's supposed to be, we say, but that's Tom Brady.
Rob Gronkowski signs, and Bruce has he had his reservations about Rob.
Party Rob, yeah.
Because when Bruce was calling games for CBS, he did a Patriots game, and he saw that Rob, one, couldn't get any separation. He had like all this body armor on. He looked to Bruce like a broken player.
Sure.
And in retrospect, it was Jason Light and Bruce just taking Tom Brady's word on blind faith that Rob can still play, because they didn't get a chance to work him out. Nothing. So they signed Rob. First day that Rob comes into the building at $1 Place. This is one of my favorite stories in the entire book. There's signs everywhere outside of the elevator. In the elevator, it says one person at a time in the elevator. And the coach's offices, again, are on the second floor. Rob is in the elevator with a Bucs employee. The two come up, doors open. Who's standing right there but Bruce? And Bruce is just like, you stupid motherfucker. And he is just going off on Rob. Can't you read a fucking sign? Don't you know what the this says? Pardon my language, but I'm just telling you exactly what happened. And Rob so Bruce goes on and on and on. And after Bruce is done with his diatribe, Rob gives this sort of a goofy smile and says, "Nice to meet you, coach."
I think sometimes it's okay, particularly for a quarterback, to yell at an offensive lineman, because your mental mistake means broken bones for me.
But then you listen to Dominique and you know if you played the game long enough and you're in certain situations, it's not going to be perfection. And that's what we got from Tom Brady. But there isn't people in those locker rooms. There aren't offensive linemen in that locker room saying, you know what? The next time Tom scream at me, all I'm going to do is this. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's saying those things, because more than 4 or not knowing his fourth down, he knows 6, and that's 6 rings. And those players respect him. His coach respects him. And if anybody does a ton of cussing, it's Bruce Arians. So those players are used to it, and they understand that Tom Brady's trying to get them to the promised land. And those simple mistakes are things that can keep them from getting there.
Interestingly, speaking of relationships, Tom Brady and Antonio Brown have I would imagine the most, a surprisingly close relationship.
Yeah. I mean, when it was, Tom was constantly going into the offices of BA and Jason Light, again, the general manager, saying, we got to sign Antonio. We got to sign Antonio. Got to sign Antonio. And he kind of just wore them out. And so finally, they call Antonio in after some of his legal stuff had been resolved. They get him into the building, and Antonio said all the right things. And so Bruce and Jason decide to take a chance. And again, this is almost like more blind faith in Tom. And I don't want to overstate that Tom played this role of assistant general manager, but he certainly impacted the influence, or impacted the decisions that Jason Light ultimately made. And then, when Antonio flies into Tampa, he doesn't know anybody in Tampa. So Tom actually picks him up at the airport who picks up people at the airport these days, Colin? and then Tom was living in Derek Jeter's mansion, the biggest house in Tampa. He recently sold, or Jeter recently sold it, but he and Giselle lived there last year. And Antonio Brown stayed with them for a week or two, and just the two would go over the playbook together. And now, you just go back to last season, how important Antonio Brown became to that team. And I think, I know he's hurt right now, but moving forward this year, Antonio Brown is going to be an immensely important player for Tampa Bay.
I lived in Tampa for 2 years. Very laid back. There's almost an island culture. Ybor City, meet you there at 5:30. I said, how will Tampa deal with Tom's intensity? I'm like, I'm not worried about, completing passes in football, but I've seen Tom scream at Bill O'Brien and Josh McDaniel. Tampa, I cover the team for 2 years. I love the Glazers, but I'm like, it's a loose culture there. It is not intense. And as your book chronicles, the players were almost begging to be coached. They were begging for that intensity. So long story short, or short story long, that was kind of my reaction. I'm completely shocked that it worked, but I was more concerned not about the fit and personnel, but the fit and personality with Tom.
This team was ready to win. They just needed a leader at that position to show them how to win. I believe they would have been a wild card team had Jameis not had 35 turnovers. The difference was Brady had maybe 13, 14 turnovers, which he cut that in half. And Brady understands, the thing that you got to love about Brady is that he understands moments. He understands that in games of this magnitude, turnovers, you pay a double price. And so he's unwilling to take unnecessary risk with the football.
Lewis, what a guy brings to an organization, the kind of pedigree, the kind of ethic, the kind of whatever, in the end, how do you frame what Brady's value was to this Buccaneer team from start to finish?
You can't quantify it, Scott. You can't put a dollar figure on it. He's underpaid relative to what he brought to this football team, because a lot of what he brought to this football team is quote-unquote professionalism that you can't necessarily touch. You just feel and you copy and you emulate and you respect. And all those things are what players did the day he walked in here as far as the respect they showed to him and the way they followed him and the way they allowed him as one of their quote-unquote peers to teach them the championship way. I'm not going to say the Patriot way, but the championship way, because this guy is the ultimate champion in pro sports. And even his head coach said the same thing. He said, at some points, I just step back and let Tom coach. How many coaches in the NFL, the ultimate ego man sport, and I'm not knocking that because there's a lot of proud people who play in this league and coach in this league, but in the ultimate ego macho man sport, how many head coaches would say, sometimes I just let my quarterback go ahead and coach. I just step back. That is the utmost respect you can pay to a player, and Tom Brady has earned that. It's like he's earned everything, Scott, in his career. And that's why I say this: don't get Brady fatigue. Just emulate the guy. Learn from him. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, because what he is he's a self-made man. And we all respect that. We all respect people who did it the hard way. This guy did it the hard way. Now he's just showing you how to sustain it. And that's a great life lesson, man. That's what he brought here.
Yeah, I think it applies to whatever we're doing. Show up and do the work. And Ryan Clark makes the great point. The 3 touchdown passes are thrown to guys that are there because Brady's there. Gronk gets a couple. Antonio Brown runs a remarkable route, gets one. And look, they all get to celebrate the fruits of their collective labors. The Buccaneers win the Super Bowl.
That's it for this video. I post a new Tom Brady video every day, so please like and subscribe. That way you'll always have a new Tom Brady video to watch every single day. Thanks for watching.